and keep you. The Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace, and give you peace. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you, and be gracious. The Lord be gracious, gracious unto you. Amen. Bayang magiliw, upang hinilang buyan ka ng magiging sa manlulupi, di ka pasisig sa nagkatagpunok sa simulan sa langit ng dagat, ang nilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal, ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagdinigig, ang bituin na tarang niyang kailan ang may di magdidilig, lupa ng harang dagat, ating pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Aming ikaya ng pagbay mga ang namatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Thank you very much, DNR ARDB Choir. A pleasant morning to everyone. I am Toti Karandang of the Science and Technology Information Institute of the Department of Science and Technology. With me here is Ms. Melly Tenorio, a seasoned broadcast journalist from Radio ng Bayan, DZRV. Magandang umaga sa iyo, Ate Mel.
Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be here as one of the MCs together with Dr. Toti Karandang to celebrate this milestone event of the National Committee on Biosafety of the Philippines, or NCBP, 25 years of biosafety regulation.
Thank you, Tita Melly, for accommodating us in your very tight schedule. We therefore must not waste time and begin our program immediately. To formally open and welcome our guests, colleagues, and associates, we have an esteemed doctor at the DOST, a highly trained infectious diseases specialist, and public health expert with extensive experience in control of tuberculosis and other emerging infections. A Master of Science, a PhD, and MD degree holder, he is recipient of numerous awards in the fields of medical research, education, medical writing, medical site leadership, and community service. He is the Executive Director of the Philippine Council for Health Research and Development of the DOST's PCHRD, and is also currently the Chairman of DOST's Biosafety Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Jaime C. Montoya.
Most honored and distinguished guests and luminaries on biosafety, colleagues in government, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Good morning. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you all to this event to celebrate the 25th founding anniversary of the National Committee on Biosafety of the NCBP. I am truly delighted and grateful to be standing here in front of you with the knowledge that despite your busy schedule, you managed to find time to share with us this historical milestone. With the theme celebrating 25 years of the Philippines, looking back and moving forward, the event is an opportune time to look back and recollect on the experiences that we have gained in regulating the products of modern biotechnology for the past 25 years. Since the constitution of the NCBP on the 15th of October 1990 through Executive Issuance number 430, I can say that we have indeed gone a long way. And I am confident that the colorful and varied experiences, coupled with the wisdom that we have acquired in the past through the years, shall steer us towards the right direction as we move forward amidst the recent developments in the field of biotechnology. We have been privileged to have with us today esteemed speakers who will share their valuable insights and knowledge and help us set the tone for the theme of this anniversary celebration. In recognition of the concerted efforts in implementing the National Biosafety Framework, the NCBP member departments shall likewise renew their pledge of fulfilling their respective mandates with respect to the regulation of GMOs. An audiovisual presentation highlighting not only the achievements but also the pillars in the Philippine biosafety regulatory system will also be presented. Those people are actually with us now today, sharing in this celebration. I, together with our colleagues from the government agencies and the scientific community, share with pride and with great pride having reached this significant milestone. However, I am at the same time humbled and inspired with the constant reminder that the ultimate goal of all of our endeavors is geared towards ensuring the safe and responsible use of modern biotechnology while harnessing the benefits for the good of the Filipino people. Maraming salamat tayong lahat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Montoya. Today, as NCBP celebrates its silver anniversary, we are even more grateful and encouraged by the interagency or interdepartmental support given by our member partners in the Biosafety Committee. Allow me to mention them and let's give them a round of applause. First, we have the Department of Agriculture, or DA. Second, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, or DENR. Third, the Department of Health, or DOH. And of course, the Department of Science and Technology, or DOST.
Indeed, biosafety is a huge national and even international concern. But despite the unending controversies surrounding biotechnology and GMOs, the Philippine Biosafety Committee continues to keep watch about the safety of people, our food, and the environment. The task of biosafety is humongous, and without the partner agencies' help and inputs, it would be a long and arduous process for us all. And so we are delighted to have the presence of our partner agencies today to celebrate the milestone year with us.
Leading the National Committee on Biosafety in the Philippines is the DOST, represented by no less than Secretary Mario Montejo. But let me first give a brief background about this man. He is my favorite secretary. He is a mechanical engineer and an innovator. His substantial background in engineering, design, and innovation, which spans 2 decades, has won him prestigious awards from the University of the Philippines, such as the 100 Outstanding Alumni Engineers of the Century in 2010, the 2011 Distinguished Alumnus in Science and Technology, and just last year, he was named the 2014 Most Distinguished Alumnus by the UP Alumni Association. Before joining DOST, he was president of several engineering-related firms. His motto, Local Technology Works, affirms the belief in the creativity of Filipinos, particularly the Philippine scientific community. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Secretary of the Department of Science and Technology, Mario Montejo.
Thank you, my favorite columnist. DNR Undersecretary Jonas Leones, DA Assistant Secretary Paz Benavides, DILG Assistant Secretary Director Lalang, DOH Director Gloria Balboa, former DOST Secretary, Estrella Alabastro, Yusik Amelia Guevara, and the rest of the DOST family, colleagues, honor guests, foremost, I congratulate each and every one, for it is through you and your collective efforts that we have come to this moment to celebrate 25 years of the National Committee on Biosafety of the Philippines, or the NCBP. On October 15, 1990, President Executive Order number 4 creating the NCBP to develop national biosafety policies and in all incidents, introduction activities involving genetic engineering. Its establishment was a result of the report in 1987 of a joint ad hoc committee on biosafety constituted by the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, International Rice Research Institute, and the Department of Agriculture. The outcome of this endeavor was consulted with several stakeholders under the auspices of the National Academy of Science and Technology. The resulting draft was then submitted to the Department of Science and Technology with a recommendation to establish the NCBP. 25 years of regulatory work on modern biotechnology is an achievement that we can all be proud of. It means that we have managed to overcome all the challenges brought by its constant and rapid changes, as well as the differing views and perspectives sectors. Through the years, the biosafety regulatory system remained functional through interagency and multi-sector efforts. At this point, I'm pleased to acknowledge and extend my warmest gratitude to all the members, departments, the departments of Agriculture, Environment and Natural Resources, Health, Foreign Affairs, Trade and Industry, and Interior and Local Government, and all the scientists and sector representatives who have seated the BP. Your knowledge and experience have indeed provided guidance for the committee to efficiently and effectively carry out its mandate. The challenges of the last 25 years were tough, but can also be considered as our stepping stones. We continue to address concerns and issues on biotechnology and learn from them as we move forward in harmonizing our efforts toward upholding the institution. Hence, the theme of our celebration, looking back, moving forward. As we continue to work towards this end, we recognize the invaluable contribution of the many key players that have joined us in this journey since the beginning of NCBP. Many scientists and government agencies have dedicated their time and energy to bring us where we are today. The issues and concerns raised by our stakeholders motivate us to continue reviewing our policies and ensuring that we are not remiss in protecting human health and environment. The acceptance, on the other hand, has given us hope that biosafety activities will prosper across the country. May we learn from these experiences in preparation for the years ahead. We anticipate that modern biotechnology shall continue to flourish in the coming years and into the future. Today, we are reaffirmed that we shall remain steadfast in upholding a robust biosafety system. We shall strive to put into action our shared vision of attaining food security, equitable access to health services, sustainable and safe environment, and industry development. Again, I congratulate all of you for the milestone we have achieved so far and wish you more successes in the future. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay po kayo sa inyong lahat.
Thank you very much, Secretary Montejo, for your very encouraging words to continuously harmonize efforts of all concerned. And next to give us a message is a co-advocate in biosafety, the Department of Agriculture Secretary Proceso J. Alcala. Today, he is ably represented by an environment lawyer and an agriculture policy expert. She has extensive experience in consultancy work on fisheries and policy, as well as agrarian reform legal services. Ladies and gentlemen, the Assistant Secretary for Regulations, Department of Agriculture, concurrent officer in charge of the Bureau of Plant Industry, heading its biotech coordinating register plant action, Paz J. Benavides II.
Thank you, Honorable Secretary Mario G. Montejo, DNR Undersecretary Jonas Leones, Dr. Jaime Montoya, distinguished members of NCBP, friends, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of Secretary Prosi J. Alcala, I am proud and pleased to congratulate the officers and staff of the National Committee on Biosafety of the Philippines on its 25th anniversary. Previous commitments have prevented the Secretary from being with us here today, but he has sent me here to assure you of the ACE commitment to the vision and aspirations of the NCBP. Please allow me to read the Secretary's message. My warmest greetings to all members of the National Committee on Biosafety of the Philippines on your 25th anniversary. The Department of Agriculture's Administrative Order Number 8, also known as Rules and Regulation for the Importation and Release into the Environment of Plants and Plant Products derived from the use of modern biotechnology, has gone a long way and has surpassed several challenges. But it would not have gone this far without the NCBP. The NCBP has painstakingly shepherded the biotechnology sector from that historic day that it approved the field trial, and after a long and difficult journey, the commercialization of MON 810, more popularly known as BT corn, the very first product of modern biotechnology. As our policy statement goes, we shall promote the safe and responsible use of accessible and safety guidelines and protocols that the NCBP crafted and established not only made possible the propagation of products of modern biotechnology, it also paved the way for the Philippines to build its capacity and achieve its technological edge in biotechnology by setting the directions of its growth under the government's development agenda. Indeed, you have helped the Philippines etch its mark and lead the countries of Asia Pacific region towards the strong performance in biotechnology. But as we celebrate this historical milestone, let us be reminded of our ultimate goal to ensure biosafety while reaping the benefits saluting the NCBP for a job remarkably and exceptionally done. With more and more people now advocating the biotech revolution, your work in the past several years is now yielding a bumper crop of achievements for the country's food security and food safety. Mabuhay po kayo.
Thank you very much, Sec Paz Benavides, for that very comprehensive speech of Secretary Alcala. And now from the department that takes care of our vitally critical part in promoting biosafety, we have the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, or DENR. To represent Secretary Ramon Paje is another lawyer with extensive technical, legal, and managerial background spanning 20 years at DENR. He obtained his master's degree from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy in Singapore's National University and also Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He also holds a master's degree in environmental science from UP Los Baños. He previously served as Director and Secretary of EMB and Legal Counsel of the Pollution
Colleagues in government, friends, media, magandang umaga sa inyo lahat. Please allow me to read the message of our Secretary, Secretary Ramon Paje. On behalf of the men and women of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, we would like to congratulate all agencies that comprise the National Committee on Biosafety of the Philippines, or the NCBP. We would like to take this opportunity to recognize all the efforts of our colleagues from the offices of the Department of Science and Technology, led by Secretary Montejo, Department of Agriculture, led by Secretary Prosi Alcala, Department of Foreign Affairs, led by Secretary of Trade and Industry, led by Secretary Domingo, DILG, led by the new Secretary, Secretaries Melsen and Sarmiento, and Department of Health, led by Secretary Janet Garin, in being part of the lead body for coordinating and harmonizing interagency and multi-sector efforts in developing biosafety in the Philippines. Since NCBP was founded on October 15, 1990, during the Aquino administration, the four competent national agencies, namely the DA, DNR, DOH, and the DOST, continuously serve as prime movers, especially in formulating national policies and guidelines on biosafety. 15 years later, modern biotechnology still opens significant potentials in developing products that ensure the safety of the environment and human health. In the DNR, we as the primary agency responsible in the conservation, management, development, and proper use of the country's environment and natural resources, provide safeguards in ensuring environmental assessments are being done and its corresponding impacts are also being identified for biosafety decisions. We affirm our role as set forth in Section 1 of Executive Order 514, namely, entitled Establishing the National Biosafety Framework of the Philippines, that DENR shall work to protect and advance the right of the people to a balanced and healthful ecology that works in accordance with the rhythm and harmony of our nature. In support of the convergent efforts of different sectors to advance biotechnology in the country, we at the DNR hope to push through the draft DAO on rules and regulations for environmental risk and biosafety assessment of genetically modified forest and wildlife resources. This draft policy could provide more provisions in light of promoting the safe and responsible use of modern biotechnology and its products to achieve a safer environment for sustainable development. The draft DAO will also help intensify the initiatives to regulate the field testing, propagation of other uses, and other uses of GMOs. This ensures that all actions pertaining to biosafety will materialize in a manner that prevents or reduces the risk to our biological diversity, public health, public safety, and more importantly, the public welfare. Aside from the proposed policy, DNR, through its research arm, the Ecosystem Research and Development Bureau, or ERDB, has also been continuously exploring ways on how biotechnology can be used to solve some of our perennial environmental problems in the country. Some of our research outputs include technologies from bioremediation of polluted rivers and the production of HQ-BAM1, an environmental friendly fertilizer, for the led by See to It, that we will provide sustenance in harnessing the power of biosafety without posing potential threats to our environment. Rest assured that biotechnology will still be used to continuously develop new products that will sustainably manage our resources. Again, my heartfelt congratulations to all the members of the National Committee on Biosafety in the Philippines for celebrating 25 remarkable years of existence. May we collectively further gear our efforts to achieve sustainable and inclusive development for our nation and the Filipino people. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you very much, Yusek Jonas. And before I call on the next guest, it will be a mortal sin for me not to acknowledge the following people. We are lucky because we are joined today by two national scientists. We have National Scientist Dolores Ramirez and National Scientist Ricardo Lantican. And of course, we are also joined by some of the academicians who are here today. Hello po, good morning sa inyo. And also, of course, aside from Secretary Mario Montejo, is another boss. Undersecretary Amelia P. Guevara is also here. And of course, my former bosses, Secretary Estrella Alabastro. Papagalitan po ako. And of course, the former USEC, Fortunato de la Peña, Boy de la Peña po. Ang aking pong mga former bosses and still bosses. Okay, so last but not the least, definitely not the least, from the department that upholds the health and well-being of Filipinos, we have the Department of Health. Representing Secretary Janet Garin today is Director Gloria Balboa. Good morning, Madam.
Thank you and good morning. It's my honor and pleasure to read to you the message of our beloved Secretary, Secretary Janet Loreto Garin, because she's right now attending an equally important activity. Well, I'm happy because our office, the Health Emergency Man, is also a partner of the DOST in a number of their programs and projects. So I'm happy to be here. Good morning. Okay. On behalf of the health community sector, congratulate the National Committee on Biosafety of the Philippines, NCBP for short, on its 25th founding anniversary. The Department of Health is honored to be part of this milestone celebration. The DOH is one of the 4 regulatory agency members, together with the DA, DNR, and DOST, since the creation of the NCBP in 1987 by virtue of Executive Order number 430, which was signed by former Philippine President Corazon C. Aquino. The DOST has always been at the forefront of science and health research, scientific breakthroughs, and technologies in support to the different industry, agriculture, and health sectors. I would like to congratulate DOST for its leadership for being the chair of the NCBP since 1987. With establishment of the UP Los Baños Biotech in 1979, the Philippines officially became an early entrant into biotechnology research in the region. The NCBP, with the 4 regulatory agency members, played a pioneering and important role in developing and establishing the national biosafety system in the country. The Philippine National Biosafety Regulatory Framework, which is for approval of GM crops, food, feeds, and for processing, led by the Department of Agriculture, has served as a model for other developing countries. After the first generation of GM products, products that possess agronomic traits only, were commercially released in the international market in 1994. On September 5, 2002, the DOH issued a statement that all GM food products derived from modern biotechnology that are in the market met international food safety standards and are in fact as safe and as nutritious as the food derived from conventional crops. The DOH supports the robust evidence and science-based food safety and nutrition assessment based on the guidelines issued by the UN-FAO WHO Codex Alimentarius Commission. Modern biotechnology has become an important means to product research and development in agriculture, medicine, industry, and environment. Beneficial products and applications include increased food production, better health products for infectious and non-infectious diseases such as diabetes, renal failure, metabolic and immunological diseases, and malnutrition, better diagnostic tools, alternative energy sources, biodiversity conservation, and environmental pollution control. The full range of applications and uses of modern biotechnology have great impact on public health care delivery system. In closing, I would like to congratulate all the officers and members of the industry sectors, especially their Institutional Biosafety Committee, IBC, the academic community, and non-government organizations for working closely with the NCBP and government agencies in an atmosphere of cooperation and collaboration to help the country move forward. May we all continue to take part in harnessing the full potential of the health products of modern biotechnology that help save and improve lives and address poverty, hunger, and malnutrition, especially among women and children. So thank you very much for listening and good morning.
Thank you very much, Director Gloria Balboa of DOH. Partner, are you ready for the smog or the haze?
Well, I want to go there, experience it. But although it's
No, but
already in
it's
northern
coming.
Luzon,
Yeah,
you know.
okay. So we should prepare for that. And perhaps the DOH can help us solve the problem.
Please help us.
Okay, so now as a symbol of our solidarity and oneness for the cause of biosafety, the departments will now renew their commitments. We would like to call in again on stage the representatives of the member agencies as well as other departments. We have Secretary Mario Montejo of the OST, Undersecretary Jonas Leones of the ENR, Director Gloria Balboa of DOH, Assistant Secretary Paz Benavides II from the Department of Agriculture, Also, we have Engineer Gerardo Maglalang from DTI, Director Manuel Gotis of DILG, and Director Donna Celeste Gatmaitan.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the slate, which contains the statement of commitment and where they are now actually signing. So, let me read what is stated. Member departments of the National Committee of the Philippines solemnly pledge to uphold of the country's guidelines on the use of modern biotechnology and its products. We shall continue to support and promote biosafety in the Philippines, strengthen our relation with other and hearts to concerns arising from the fast-paced developments of modern biotechnology. We shall further place utmost importance on the need to achieve and sustain food security, equitable access to health services, sustainable and safe environment, and industry development. Signed this 27th day of October 2015 in Ortigas, Pasig City. Yun po ang nilalaman ng kanilang pinirmahan. And it's only fitting that there's going to be a photo op immediately after.
A round of applause.
Another round of applause, ladies and
Another
gentlemen.
round of applause.
And definitely, this shall be immediately uploaded to Facebook.
Yes. Okay, so thank you for renewing your commitment to biosafety, people. Today we are going to listen to the presentation of our next speaker who will tackle 5 years of biosafety from a regulatory body perspective. He is none other than Attorney Jose Maria Ochave. Attorney Ochave is Senior Vice President at United Laboratories Incorporated, where he manages several units including Rights Med, Legal Services, Regulatory Affairs, Business Development, and External Affairs, among others. He is Professor 2 at the Philippine Judicial Academy, Legal Advisor to the Department of Science and Technology Biosafety Committee, and a member of the Governing Council of the Philippine Council for Health, Research, and Development. He obtained his Bachelor of Engineering, his Bachelor of Laws degrees from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. He ranked 7th in the 1986 Chemical Engineering Board. He graduated salutatorian at the UP College of Law and ranked 11th in the 1992 bar examinations. He obtained his Master of Laws degree from the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor under a Clyde DeWitt Fellowship. He was awarded highest honors in the Management Development Program of the Asian Institute of Management. While in UP, Attorney Ochave was Editor-in-Chief of Engineering Lag Script, Chairman of Sandigan para sa Mag-aaral at Sambayanan or Samasa Party, Secretary General of the Center for Nationalist Studies of the Honor Society of the Order of the Purple Feather, and founding chairman of the Association of Law Students. Attorney Ochave is a product of the Philippine Science High School System. Attorney Ochave. Kala ko wala eh.
Thank you very much. Magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat. I think it's because this less than attention ako yung mga abogado dyan. When I joined the NCBP, That was, I was fresh from Michigan. And Popolutilla, who was my professor in law school, requested me to be an alternate for him. And that was because the other alternate, Tony Lavinia, was appointed Undersecretary of Environment. So Popo later on became, well, Deputy Director General of NEDA and then Secretary of Energy. Little did I realize that 20 years later, I will still be here. So this is my 20th year in the biosafety. I was asked to talk to you about 25 years. You know, the last silver anniversary I attended was about 10 years ago, and that was the of Science, Philippine High School. And you know, why do you attend silver anniversaries? No, first to find out how everyone looks like after 25 years. Second is basically to, well, find out, you know, there's another 25 years, you know, can we still do something together, etc. And it's you know, it's in recognition of what the school has done for you. So I think to a certain extent, seriously, 25 years is a period by which you can remember and affirm. Remember what you have done together. By the way, where is the, how do I ask you to transfer slides? Okay. It's a time to remember, time to the narratives of the past 25 years. And in gatherings like this, the narratives are important because you have to pass on the narratives to the next generation. Sometimes what happens is that it's also an attempt to show the world that our generation is better than the previous one, the next one. You know, I hope that that doesn't happen today. But it's really a time to remember, time to share narrative, share stories, and a time to affirm. Affirm in the sense that, hey, it's an affirmation that we're still here after 25 years. And we hope to be here, well, me not in NCBP, not in the DOST-BC for the next 25. You know, so where do I point this? Oh, sorry, technical difficulties. Oh, so the only time you should ever look back is to see how far you've come. And certainly, biosafety regulations or the regulatory system here in the Philippines has come a long way since 25 years ago. I was initially asked to be the one to speak in sort of 5 years here, and then I realized I was the one who summarized it the 15th. But in all, like in all reunions, you know, you recognize and you acknowledge the contributed you. And student knowledge, you know, the teachers who guided you, who did not led astray. And I think this is an opportune time for all of us to recognize those who have guided us through the years. And I speak of the chairpersons of the National Committee on Biosafety of the Philippines. Some of them are here with us. One is no longer with us, unfortunately, because he has since passed away, Dr. Punong Bayan. But Dr. Lantican, the very first chairperson of National Biosafety Committee, is here. Dr. Stella Alabastro is here as well, our Secretary of Secretary of Science and Technology before. Secretary Montejo, who continues to guide us and continues to provide us with the resources to continue our job, is here. And since the advent of 514, we also have the DOST-BC, the Biosafety Committee, and we have three who are here. Let me just acknowledge the presence of Dr. Ray Iborra, Dr. De La Peña, Fortunato De La Peña is here, and Dr. Jimmy Montoya, who continues to lead the DOST Biosafety Committee. But there are also two persons who have been very instrumental in terms of biosafety regulations here. They were neither the chairpersons of the DOST-BC, nor were they the chairpersons of the National Biosafety Committee. But let me tell you that these two are the ones who actually are the ones who contributed the most, I think, in terms of biosafety regulations in the Philippines. And these are national scientists Dr. Ramirez, Dr. Dolores Ramirez, and Dr. Flerida Carino, who unfortunately is not here. Yeah. So, let me now go to the discussion points. I propose to divide this into three: the foundation years, the first 15. So those of you who attended the lecture, the summation in the first 15 years, my apologies, because this will look quite similar to what I presented 15 years ago, because after all, you don't change 15 years, the first 15 years, simply by having another 10 years. And then we talk about the last 10 years and thoughts for the next 5. Why the next 5? Because when I presented the first 15 years, I said thoughts for the next 15. And so since only 5 years are remaining of that next 15, I would just talk about the next 5. And besides, I'm wishing that we will no longer be here, after the next 5. So, the foundation years, the first 15, the beginnings. So, biosafety regulations will have to acknowledge the beginnings, its genesis, not from the issuance of 430, EO 430, but from the efforts of then UP Chancellor Raul de Guzman and ERI Director General Swaminathan when they created the Joint Committee on Biosafety. This was about, I think, less than 12 years from the Asilomar Conference. And the objectives were, among others, and those are just two institutions, UPLB and ERI, to review and approve, deny research proposals submitted by UPLB and ERI scientists for experiments requiring safety arrangements. And number 2, to provide guidelines for experimental protocols. Now, these two objectives were later on carried to the National Biosafety Committee. So the composition is 8 scientists from UPLB and 1 each from the DA, the Bureau of Plant Industry, and the DOST-Philippines. So you will really realize that this was made by scientists, by the number of people who are members of the committee. Because if this were made by lawyers and with lawyers, this will be only 3 people there. Because otherwise, you will not be able to complete anything. Okay. So the committee studied the biosafety guidelines of several countries, and this included Australia, Japan, United Kingdom, and of course USA, and of course the quarantine laws of the Philippines. And the biosafety guidelines were drafted and presented in international conferences and submitted to NAS. And the recommendation was for the National Academy of Science and Technology to take the lead in having the nationally. So let's now go to the E430, on which the silver anniversary celebration is based. So let me we're coming full circle. This was issued at the time of President Corazon Aquino, whose son now is the sitting president. So it's started with, we started with an Aquino presidency, and we're celebrating the 25th anniversary with an Aquino presidency. Sometimes Philippines is just like Gabriel Garcia Marquez novel. There's some form of magic realism here. It can be surreal at times. So I will not go very deeply into the mandate of NCBP, but suffice to say that its primary purpose was to identify and evaluate potential hazards in GE experiments, genetic engineering experiments. It had several other mandates, and I just listed some of them here. But this early mandate had several issues. First, what was included there were potentially harmful exotic species. So even if the organism was not genetically engineered, it was included in the mandate of NCBP at that time if it was a potentially harmful exotic species, which unfortunately was already being regulated by the other agencies. Second, in terms of regulate of the NCBP, what NCBP just issued at the time were guidelines. It was just an interagency creation It had no power to discipline. It had no power to impose penalties. But all it had was the power to advise. But it is to the credit of the public research institutions and many of the even the private research institutions that they never questioned the authority of NCBP at that time, because everyone thought that, hey, the proper regulations to ensure the safe and responsible use of biotechnology will be to the benefit of everyone, despite the fact that you have to go through the rigorous process then imposed by NCBP. The second, how do we do this? Next. Okay. The second was the relationship with the line agencies, particularly with the plant quarantine service. Because effectively, the implementing agency in service, all they had to do at that time was provide an advisory opinion to the plant quarantine service. But the one who had statutory authority to prevent the entry of genetically engineered organisms which have not been reviewed by the NCBP was the plant quarantine service. And it is, I think, but proper that we acknowledge the contributions done by the plant quarantine service during the past 25 years. The next one is the access to the best available science. How do you access the best available science when oftentimes the expert in that particular field is also the proponent? You know, we have a very limited technical, scientific and technical base here in the Philippines. And therefore, oftentimes, you know, you want to consult the person who's the best, in a best position to provide the technical and scientific advice on that particular application, but it turns out he or she is also the project proponent. So that was one of the first things that we had problems before. And then, extent of public participation. To what extent should the public participate in very, very technical issues like biotech, like biosafety? So, but at the same time, we recognize that the ones who will assume the risk in case there was a mistake in terms of the regulation would be the public at large. But understand fully the consequences of what we were doing. So, through time, you know, there are certain questions that, you know, sit down, you will never be able to answer by just sitting down. You just have to do it and hope that you commit, you know, and do whatever you need to do. And in time, these issues have been settled. Now, first 15 years, I outlined 4 defining moments in early NCBP history: the BT cornfield testing, the issuance of AO8 of the Department of Agriculture, the issuance of 514, providing for the National Biosafety Framework. I promised to behave today, so I will not comment much on this defining moments, and the ratification of the Cartagena Protocol. Let me talk about the BT corn experience. This started in August, December 1996 with the first greenhouse evaluation of BT corn. And using transgenic hybrid materials from Pioneer Hybrid. And then 97, 98, the second greenhouse evaluation. And then December 99 to March 2000 with the limited field trial. And 2001 to 2002, multi-location field trials by Monsanto and Pioneer Hybrid. And eventually, 2003, the BT corn was approved for commercialization by the Department of Agriculture. It was not smooth sailing for us at that time. First, you know, the technology was not well known. You know, there were a lot of scare stories about BT corn. There even were reports in the newspapers which said that if you eat BT corn, that if you're male, you will be transformed. You will have high estrogen levels, and you will be transformed into female. You will have female characteristics. There were even a report that said that if you eat BT corn, then your hair will fall, which probably may be true because my hair fell. You know, just kidding. But the BT corn experience provided us a lot of lessons. You know, since it was the first encounter of NCBP against those who were ideologically opposed. Never mind those who listened, because there were a lot of those who were opposed to it simply because they didn't know much about the technology. And therefore, we had to explain to them But, let's be honest, there are those who are ideologically opposed to it and not based on any science. So it was the first encounter that we had with them. And what was good about this, like in Asilomar perhaps, was that the scientists were compelled, to explain what they were doing to the public. There were initial frustrations before because the public could not understand. When I said the public, the media, and more importantly, the legislators, because a lot of them could not understand what we were talking about, what Dr. Ramirez was talking about. So Dr. Ramirez had to translate this and to think, that these were lay people and not her students in UPLB. Because it would have been easier if it were her students in UPLB. Now, but it also highlighted that, looking at the risk per se, science-based risk assessment, while it is the core of the biosafety assessment, but it also involves other issues which NCBP at that time was ill-equipped to handle. Because people were talking about socioeconomic considerations. At the time, NCBP, what the hell is socioeconomic consideration? Because we were, and he will talk about it later this afternoon. But at the time, it was risk assessment that we were talking about and how to manage the risk if this risk come about. So we were also criticized at the time because the risk management measures required of the applicants were too strict. Remember, this was the first time that we were allowing a GE crop to be released into the environment. It took a long time to approve the application. On hindsight, part of it was to be cautious, primarily because the public get prepared for what we were talking about. And the third one, it was very expensive for the applicant. Never mind the Monsantos of this world, they can afford that. But the problem was the public research institutions. Primary in our mind, regulate so effect on the public research institutions. It is the public research institutions that will suffer if we become very, very, very strict or unreasonably strict. So, because of our inability to handle, the non-technical issues, we said perhaps the release into the environment should better be handled by another agency. An agency that is more political in nature, in the sense that they have, they know more how to communicate to the people in terms of this risk. And this was the birth of the Department of Agriculture AO number 8, Administrative Order number 8, which was then ironically issued by Secretary Leonardo Montemayor. So Secretary Montemayor at the time, when during the BT Corn debate, was actually on the other side. He was in Congress at that time. He was the one of those questioning the BT Corn, etc. But just to show you that there's an entire breadth of people who were opposed to it, people who were ideologically opposed, and people who just didn't know what it was all about and wanted us to explain. Secretary Montemayor was one of those here. And later on, when he learned more about the technology, and he became Secretary of Agriculture, that was a time when he issued DA Administrative Order number 8. And what it did was to serve what was then already an existing arrangement with the NCBP and the Department of Agriculture through the plant quarantine to the Bureau of Plant Industry. And it transferred field testing decision making to the agency most equipped to handle it, which we said was Department of Agriculture. So NCBP pre-514 was just focused really on it was still, DA was part of it, but the focus of that committee before the Interagency Committee and DOST was really on the confined. And later on, the decisions on field testing were transferred. That was also the one which was transferred to the Department of Agriculture. And more importantly, it ensures that socioeconomic considerations are included in the decision-making process, because Department of Agriculture makes those decisions, every day, perhaps, And DOST, perhaps, particularly NCBP, which was then composed of mostly scientists, would not be in a position to do it. And then came EO 514 in 2006. This was issued by then President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo on the basis of a grant from the United Nations Environmental Program. And it established the National Biosafety Framework, which was essentially a description of a regulatory framework that was already in existence, which is fine because the good thing about us is we had already the framework, and this formalized the presence of that framework. But what it did was it created a new NCBP, a super body with policy-making powers and expanded membership. And here you included already the other agencies, the Department of Interior and Local Government, the Department of Foreign Affairs, and so on and so forth. What it did about was it identified the national competent of purpose protocol. So it divided immediately, oh, for this particular type of experiment releases, your particular for this organism with this department. So what it did was it clearly identified the national competent authorities who, on the basis of the Cartagena Protocol. Now, next one, ratification of Cartagena Protocol. Now, let me just emphasize this, The NCBP guidelines predated the Cartagena Protocol. We already had the system here even before Cartagena. In the same way that, let me emphasize as well, that the regulations for biosafety, the ones who pushed for it when nobody else knew anything about it were the scientists themselves. Unfortunately, fortunately, not the lawyers. So it's the scientists themselves who said, hey, regulate us. And they did not ask for self-regulation, like probably the media does, or the advertising agencies will do, but they went to the government and said, government, please regulate us. They did not ask for self-regulation. They asked for government regulation. I wonder which particular industry will do that. So, even before Cartagena, even before the Philippines signed Cartagena. So, this is one area. We signed Cartagena not because, or we're doing biosafety guidelines here, biosafety regulations, not because of an international treaty. That's the problem sometimes with us. We want to be, fair-haired boys of the international arena. We sign all treaties and then later on do everything what the treaty says, here. And it's one way of making people accept whatever is in the treaty by saying, hey, we signed the international treaty. But this one is different. Here, we already had our biosafety regulation. So the advantage was when we were negotiating Cartagena, we knew exactly what we were talking about. It was not some theoretical construct that we were discussing. So we knew exactly how it will operate in a system like in a developing country like the Philippines. That was a big difference. We did not need any international agency to tell us what to do. We were already doing it, and we were already doing it simply because we thought it was the proper thing to do. We do not need any international body to tell us what to do or what is good for us. We already did it even before they even thought about it. Now, the NCBP has always supported the Cartagena Protocol to help strengthen the regulation of We helped Cartagena. We wanted Cartagena. Why? Because of the transboundary movement. We could regulate what was here, but we could not effectively regulate the transboundary movement. So it imposes, certain obligations on the part of those who wish to transfer genetically inserted LMOs, living modified organisms, to the Philippines. Let's be protective in matters of sovereignty. We are not the guys who will say, whatever you say, we will do. No. The first prism that we always look at when it comes to Cartagena negotiation is it to the national interest? And we are aware that our national interest is not the same as the national interest of Malaysia, of India, of US, or whatever. It is a determination first is what is the national interest before we even send anyone to Cartagena. And that makes a big difference. And we know the fact that we know how it works and we've been successful, modesty aside, we've been successful, is a big advantage. Now, the last 10 years. The last 10 years have been relatively quiet ones, for at least for us in the DOST Biosafety Committee, not for the Department of Agriculture. So the technology continues to grow, with more countries adopting the technology, the safe and responsible use of technology. And chances are it will continue to grow. So the last 10 years saw the rapid growth as well of biotechnology. And these are the number of projects that we have through the years that we have passed upon. So in terms of received proposals, 305, and you see that we do deny proposals. There are a lot of them that we have deferred or we have denied. I don't know whether we have been faster or quicker in terms of evaluation. It is for you to give us feedback on this one, but we have tried our best in terms of acting quickly on the applications. So let's look at the highlights of the last 10 years. One of the key highlights was the implementation of EU 514 with the convening of the NCBP and the formation of agency biosafety committees. So the original NCBP, was transformed into a DOST biosafety committee. And then you have an NCBP now, which is likewise interagency, whose memberships are coming from various agencies, more agencies than not the ones we have in the DOST Biosafety Committee. So the DOST Biosafety Committee, which passes on the applications for confined use, is limited just to DOST. By the way, just as a footnote, the basis of national interest here, we have received a lot of, comments, and sometimes complaints that, hey, why do you still require to go through confined use when or lab use when this was already tested elsewhere? Why can't we just continue and go to confined? I go to release, planned release here in the Philippines. I have a confession to make. That was deliberate. And the reason was to make sure that there is enough technology transfer, or at least technology, a transfer of know-how. Because if we force everyone to go through laboratory first, the theory, the hypothesis was that there will be more Filipino scientists who will be involved in the laboratory. At least start with the laboratory, than if you just allow a release into the environment. And through that, we hope, I don't know whether we've been successful, but through that, we hope that more people our public research institutions will be developing the capability through relationships with the various international organizations, or even with the multinational corporations, or even with the private domestic corporations. So it's really to expand the technological base that we want that we inserted that particular provision. Now, the other highlight was the issuance of a manual on biosafety decision-making process under EU 514. This was a protracted process, but we're very happy that this has already been issued finally. And more we see applications for national priority crops. I mean, there were less corn now. Now we have boom rice, which is even more sensitive than corn. So the next 5 years will probably might be rougher than the first 15 years, because you're now talking about the staple crop here in the Philippines. Of course, we had eggplant, and the lawyer, there's another lawyer here who handles a case on BT eggplant. So if you want some status on the case, then probably you can talk to him. And of course, cotton and tomato. So more and more we see these types of crops in the applications. And then we've also seen the draft of the guidelines for risk assessment of experiments on GM arthropods. This is in line with the with the mosquito, GM mosquito, that was being looked upon before as a possible solution, as one of the many solutions to address the dengue problem here in the Philippines. Although that was still a draft pa rin, no? And the establishment of BCH Pilipinas, which hopefully, together with the websites, will increase transparency. One of the reasons why we have been successful in the Philippines in terms of regulations is because of transparency. We've always been transparent. We've always talked to people and told them exactly what we were doing. Now, Dr. Montoya is already looking at me, and therefore I have few minutes only. So, some thoughts on the next 5. Some thoughts on the next 5 years. Number 1, identification. I would like to propose the performance metrics of the biosafety regulatory system for the next 5 years. Number 1, we continue to prevent. We continue to focus on safe and responsible use and prevent potential hazards in GAE experiments. Number 2, the second metric for us will be to the extent that how can we further ensure the collaboration among the different agencies which are part of the regulatory system. Case in point is share in the budget instead of just leaving it with the Department of Science and Technology. The third one is research programs to establish risk assessment protocols and assessment of long-term effects of the research. The fourth one is we should be measured in terms of the public trust, in the robustness of the biosafety regulatory system. And number 5 is the capacity building for the next generation of regulators. We have to already start that. MRR na ho kami, maximum residence rule na kami dito sa NCBP. I'm sure DR, and by the way, Dr. Carino just entered the room. Where is she? There is Dr. Bubot Carino, one of the pillars of biosafety. So I think for us, many members of biosafety, for us, many biosafety regulators, we already want to graduate. So I think it's time for the next generation to come in. Otherwise, we will be on MRR. Maraming salamat po, and magandang umaga po.
Grabe. Uupo lang siya doon po, Tita Melly.
Yes, okay. So, who is number 1 to to ask question?
We are given 10 minutes for a very, very short.
By the way, let me just mention one person also who's been there since we started. The only reason I don't have her in the slide is because I couldn't find a picture of her in the internet. Every time I type her name, I see Mexican actresses coming out. Beautiful Mexican. Well, she's equally beautiful, but it's not her. So may I recognize Baby Estacio, Miss Baby Estacio.
Thank you for your pabebe wave.
Pabebe wave.
Yes, Tita Melly.
Okay, so who's gonna ask the first question? Pwede kaya ako magtawag? I have friends here, so Christine. Pwede kaya akong magtanong?
Pero member ka rin ng committee, so ikaw sasagot.
Sige, hindi na lang ako magtatanong. Anyone?
There's a question over there.
Okay.
So, madam, please use the microphone. Kindly introduce your name and your affiliation.
Here, in front.
Good morning. I'm Lita Suerte Felipe from the Department of Science and Technology, Legislative Office. A while ago, Dr. Attorney Echabe mentioned about the problem of something like on the funding aspect. And I was thinking that this is the auspicious time to really file the bill which our office has crafted under Yusek Boy de la Peña, which is actually strengthening the project NCBP via a legislative bill. And maybe the experience before when the Attorney Echave was having difficulty in the Congress. That was 9th and 8th Congress ago. And congressmen right now, the third, the fourth generation congressmen or legislators are already well versed and already the much improved legislators because they are very learned. So they would, I think, from the standpoint of legislation, I think that they would be more receptive to really pushing forward a bill that would strengthen the biosafety aspect of the Philippines. With a law, there will be no problem because you institutionalize a program, you get a regular funding. The institutional memory is not lost because you have regular plantilla people who will run the program, and the problem of changing administration would a little bit be addressed by a legislative act. That's my proposal, Attorney Achabe. Thank you very much.
Maraming salamat po diyan. I have a confession, you know. As a lawyer, I'm probably one of those lawyers who unfortunately doesn't have much trust in what is written in the law. You know, I'm not, personally, I'm not averse to the idea of having a statute. No, the only concern is that will we be able to shepherd it through Congress, so the two houses, properly, without insertions that we will find, without opening a hornet's nest, number one, and number two, without insertions that in effect will curtail the particularly public research. So that's my only concern. If in your determination you can properly shepherd it, by all means do so, please, because I agree with you. If we really want to institutionalize this, it should have regular funding. But on institutional memory lies with the people, etc. And not really with the whether or not you have statute. Institutional memory will be there. If you want to remember. So I'm not totally averse to it, except that make sure, because I have had a lot of experiences in shepherding, law through the Congress. You think that you already have the draft that you wanted in Congress, in the House of Representatives, and then you agree already to the draft in the Senate, and then lo and behold, when it comes out of the conference committee, there are a lot of provisions which were never even discussed in either of the two houses. So if you think and you believe that really it can be done, then please do so. But as for me, I've always been a skeptic, so I don't know. But I will welcome it if it can be done properly. Thank you.
Yes, madam. Another question over there.
Violi Villegas from the International Rice Research Institute. Not a question, but a follow-up on what Joey said. Enacting a law is very difficult. It has to undergo through a series of process. And with the advances in science, repealing an enacted law will, I think, be doubly difficult.
Let me just illustrate. And this is not even a statute. I come from another industry as well, pharma. We were very much active in the cheaper medicines campaign because we wanted affordable medicines, affordable and quality medicines to be available. The law that came out did not, contain many provisions discussed. Number two, remember MDRP, maximum drug retail price. In law that's called MRP, maximum retail price. There is no such legal animal as MDRP per statute. No, the only reason it's MDRP because at the time MRP might be misconstrued as Mar Rojas for president. Yeah, so it became MDRP. Okay, MDRP was issued because of the stubbornness of one particular company. And it was an executive order, not a statute, imposing price control on certain products. lowering the price by 50%. You know, so that's an executive order issued by the president. You know, so no company can increase its price in so far as those molecules are concerned unless there is another executive issuance allowing the increase. Do you think any president will allow that? Will issue an executive order allowing the increase in drug prices? No. You know, and that's only one person that you have to talk to. Just imagine a law that will include, you know, on genetic engineering goes through Congress. Some insertions were made, and then you have advances in technology, you know, and now that will it automatically be covered or not covered by that particular law. Then how difficult would it be to go through Congress? Again, let's be clear about the reason. If the reason is to be able to access financial resources, then perhaps, yes, perhaps we can do it. If you can do a statute that is very, very general and very, very short, and the important thing only is to assure the financial sources, sources of funds, then so be it. But a statute that will seek to regulate biotech, forget it, because we're shooting ourselves in the foot. But if it's only to access funds and establish an office, then probably that, if that can be done, then you have my support for that.
Okay, so perhaps we can entertain one more question. Yes, ma'am. Dr. Raimundo?
Sean Raimundo from the National Academy of Science Technology and UPLB. I have been with IBC at UPLB and Erie for some time now, and I thought there were comments that our regulations are too strict, much more strict than developed countries. Do you see lessening of these restrictions and also lessening of the paperwork involved? Many of our clients are really complaining about the paperwork required by NCBP.
I cannot speak for the committee po at this time, but at least for the DOST-BC, if there are some suggestions on how we can do it, then I think we'll be very, very happy to look at to review the suggestions, because nobody wants really to come up with to be carrying, you know, this thick a folder. And I'm sure Dr. Ramirez and Dr. Carino and the rest of the committee members, you know, would be very happy if we can just look at proposals which are much, much shorter than what we have right now. Again, you know, perhaps in the next few years, the next 5 years, perhaps that's something that we have to look into. Again, because we already said when we celebrated the 15th year that that's something that we should look into. But, but again, let's review it. I agree with you. It's just too burdensome, you know. But we have to balance it with, you know, making sure that we're able to properly assess the risk. And this is one area I think where we shouldn't. DOST-BC at least is not averse to having discussions with the proponents on this. I mean, we're not like any other government agencies who always see the private sector or the applicants or the public research institutions as, you know, people who will try to, you know, make one over us, you know. It's always a collaborative effort. The reality in administrative regulation is that there is information asymmetry. Normally, the applicants know more about the technology or about their project than we do. So please educate us, because probably if we learn more about it, then perhaps the period to process all this application will be much shorter.
So thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much. Okay, Dr. Dantican has something to say.
Attorney Ochave.
Just a comment. This is not a question.
This is not a question.
One gratifying thing that the public should know is that with the advent of BT corn, we have more than 800,000 hectares grown to BT corn, and this has really boosted the yields of the crop. And the Philippines is now at the cusp of self-sufficiency in corn. We used to import a lot of corn for mainly for feeds. And another thing that can is that we don't need for growing more yellow corn. Of course, we can, but we can concentrate now on white corn, and we have in the Philippines available what we call high protein corn. If you mix high protein corn, green 50-50 with rice, or 25 corn, 75 part rice, the public has tried this, and it's palatable. And we are concentrating our efforts on rice production. If we effort in substituting corn with rice, anyway, we have only a 5% shortage rice. If you mix it up, then we can save lots of money, and this is for security, and even personal, I mean, health aspects of it are assured.
Okay, what can you say?
I haven't eaten that yet.
You have,
But I saw that in Cebu. It's a combination
yeah,
of rice and
yes,
corn.
I have
no?
tasted it in Cebu. So it's masarap.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's healthy, But the white corn and rice, not the yellow one. That's the one. That's
The
the
yellow
one
one's
I
for feeds, I
tasted.
suppose.
Yeah. Okay, so we would like to thank all the people who asked questions. I'd like to meet Dr. Yoli Villegas, academician
Asuncion
Asuncion
Raimundo,
Raimundo,
yeah.
and of course,
A national scientist.
scientist. To those who participated in the open forum, thank you very much. And now we would like to watch the video on the biosafety.
Please watch this.
A crop that multiplies its yields, a plant that resists insects and insecticides, food or feeds that are genetically modified to enhance or prolong life. These are just a few of the countless amazing things biotechnology can do. And because this area of science is powerful, dynamic, and sometimes life-changing, it is often met with skepticism and direct attack. Dreading the unknown, the what-ifs, and miscalculations in science are simply frightening. Almost 3 decades ago, our Filipino scientists from UP Los Baños and the International Rice Research Institute felt the need to introduce biosafety in their work.
And the scientists themselves thought that it would be prudent to have some kind of oversight. And that's the beginning of the concept of biosafety. Biosafety concerns in the Philippines, which we started in 1987, was really more of the concern of the scientists. So we were talking about guidelines, we were talking about what would be the possible consequences, the possible applications.
Aware of both beneficial and adverse results of experiments and scientific research, biosafety serves as a guidepost for biotech research scientists and environmentalists in carefully carrying out research activities.
The need to establish such regulatory body in the Philippines was prompted by the fact that rapid advances in recombinant DNA technology in leading sectors around the world were taking place in the 1980s towards the development against were already in the field testing stage in the US.
Thus, the Joint Committee on Biosafety was formed in October 12, 1987. Through the National Academy of Science and Technology, a series of consultations on levels. Guidelines were drawn up with references to existing guidelines from the US, Australia, Japan, and the United Kingdom. The succeeding draft guidelines were even presented in conferences abroad. However, they focused more on procedures and processes and other aspects of biosafety. Rather than legislating biosafety in the Philippines, it was preferred that it just be adopted on a national scale so that scientists in the country are aware of these guidelines in various stages of their research or field work. NAST prepared the almost final draft and submitted this to DOST, which proposed the creation of the National Committee on Biosafety to then President C. Aquino. On October 15, 1990, President Aquino promulgated Executive Order number 430, established the National Committee on Biosafety of the Philippines, or NCBP. The NCBP is the lead national body to accomplish these 9 mandates. The same year, the final version of biosafety guidelines came out. The composition of this regulatory body has the DOST Undersecretary for R&D as chair and representatives from DA, DENR, and DOH as ex officio members. The NCBP Secretariat is located at the office of the Undersecretary of Department's additional staff support when necessary.
It was the concern in the science community that the NCBP should be headquartered at the DOST with multi-agency representation to be headed by the Undersecretary for R&D. As Undersecretary for R&D at DOST at the time, I was appointed Undersecretary from 1998 to 1992. I became personally involved in the whole affair of organizing the nascent NCBP. The drafting of the executive order, the choice of the first lineup of people who would constitute the membership of the NCBP, the setting up of a functional command center at the DOST, the conduct of a continued implementation of the first set of regulatory rules in 1991.
Another element of the structure is the Institutional Biosafety Committees, or the IBCs. The IBCs must be in institutions involved in genetic engineering and other hazardous biological work. The IBCs shall be composed of at least 5 members, 3 experts in the field, and 2 community representatives who shall speak for the interest of the community. Members must be screened and approved by NCBP.
Always my experience. I think the official Philippine attitude to GM is very much the same as Erie's, which is that GM technology is potentially able to solve many of the world's worst problems, but we really have to take the biosafety issues seriously. There are unknown risks which we have to address. So, although many scientists often find it difficult to comply, they will accept that it's necessary to take serious measures to keep us. We have very clearly defined regulations and guidelines from the Philippine government, which enable us to show the scientists this is what you have to do. So it's not so much, well, it isn't, in a sense, it's a challenge, but it's a very helpful challenge because it makes sure that we do what we know we have to do to make sure that when we deal with transgenic material, we deal with it safely.
An ad hoc team is occasionally formed to conduct scientific review or evaluation of biosafety proposals independent of NCBP. This team is a Scientific and Technical Review Panel, or STRP. STRP is composed of experts whose fields are relevant to the proposal being evaluated. The guidelines were at first considered as too stringent, but many continued to subscribe to the Philippine Bible of Biosafety because it showed we uphold safety.
So between 1987 until about 1998, the scientists were left alone to tinker with biosafety guidelines. We were we were very, very strict. Then as we get more information and we observing, but they were not really as bad as what we're taught.
We understand that the biosafety standards being implemented by technology, following the rules and law, following the rules and the law that have been enacted by the Philippine Congress, are among the toughest and the best in the world. They represent what is now known internationally as what needs to be implemented so that we are assured that any foods produced from the research are as best as we can make them and as safe as any other food that's available in the market. That's why we are happy to be working the Department of Science and Technology in this major venture for the progress of science and food security.
We think that we are adhering to regulations, and we are also helping to develop, in collaboration with DOST, develop regulations that suit current thinking. We have a very close interaction. Our safety committee at IRRI works very closely with the DOST Biosafety Committee to ensure that we develop our containment of transgenic work in an appropriate and safe manner.
The vigilance had probably paid off, as there had been no untoward incidents that occurred despite the strong and continued protests from environmentalists and other anti-biotech groups. As NCBP celebrates its 25th year, new challenges unfold and new regulations will have to be formed to protect life and the environment.
Among the challenges is, I guess, that the technology is developing so rapidly. We keep on, we should not by the rate, and therefore we need to interact quite frequently with DOST-TBC to ask, well, what do we do with this new technology? How do we, what new regulations do we want to introduce? And there are going to be new challenges coming up. The CRISPR technology, for example, where the process is transgenic, the process of modifying the plant is transgenic, but the final product, like this, countries haven't yet defined it as transgenic or not. That's going to have to be an issue that the Philippine regulatory system has to address. The other challenge is that we're a global organization. We work across the world. We have not only Philippine regulations to consider, but also the broader implications. And we have to consider our liability in the broader context. Do we need to take different measures to take adequate stewardship, to deal with our stewardship responsibilities adequately, beyond our obligation to comply with Philippine law?
NCBP continues to be vigilant in upholding the integrity of science and technology, because more than that improve and that protect values.
Congratulations to NCBP on its anniversary. It really has come a long way since it was established in the late 1980s by then President Corazon Aquino. The credibility that it enjoys today can be attributed to the eminent scientists who set up the science-based guidelines and implemented them through the years. And I must particularly mention national scientist Dali Ramirez, who was with NCDP from day one. But the continuing challenge
in providing guidance on the safe and responsible use of modern biotechnology and its practice. The country has immensely benefited from the technology since the commercialization of biotech in 2002. Our biosafety practices have played a significant role in shepherding this technology that has made a tremendous impact on the lives of our pork farmers and their farmers. Modern will continue to be developed and biosafety regulation will evolve to address the issues and challenges that come with it. We shall remain steadfast in upholding an efficient, predictable, and science-based biosafety regulatory system.
NCBP, for what it has gone through in the last 25 years, is a fruitful testimony to responsible, watchful, efficient, and relevant biosafety regulation.
So, Tita Melly, that was 25 years, no? Captured in a 10-minute video, no?
The technology
Prepared
really.
in 2 weeks.
No,
Congratulations
one
to,
week lang yan. Yeah, of course.
palakpakan po natin yung
Si
mga
Miss Fe.
nag-prepare, no?
Si Miss
Kinomission ng
Baby
NCBP, ang
Yan.
STII, yan,
Wow.
no? At ang grupo.
Kaya pala ang gagaling eh.
Yan, no?
Yeah,
2
very.
weeks.
2 weeks. Wow. Congratulations.
Okay, so Ate Melly, so we move on to the presentation of service awards and handing over of plaques of appreciation to the men and women who put in a lot of hard work to make biosafety a reality in this country. Let us give the recognition they deserve. May I request Undersecretary Amelia P. Guevara. She is the Undersecretary in charge of the National Committee on Biosafety. And of course, with Dr. Jaime C. Montoya, the DOST's chair for Biosafety, to hand over the plaques of appreciation.
Okay, so we will call the awardees, and I'd like to call Dr. Dolores Ramirez to come up the stage, please. Okay, so we would like to read the plaque of appreciation to Dolores A. Ramirez, National Scientist and Professor Emeritus, University of the Philippines, Los Baños, for her invaluable contributions in the formulation and development of the country's biosafety protocols and procedures. Her unwavering commitments in the advancement of biosafety had been instrumental in the establishment of the National Committee on Biosafety of the Philippines, or NCBP, in 1990. Her vast experience and expertise in her field have significantly in the implementation of national policies and guidelines on biosafety in the pursuit of attaining food security, protecting public health and the environment, and improving the quality of human life. Given this 27th day of October 2015 at Ortigas, Pasig City, signed Mario G. Montejo, Secretary DOST and Chairperson NCBP.
Our next awardee, plaque of appreciation to Amelia C. Angkog, PhD, regular member, National Research Council of the Philippines. For her invaluable contributions in the formulation and development of the country's biosafety protocols and procedures, her unwavering commitment in the advancement of biosafety had been instrumental in the establishment of the National Committee on Biosafety of the Philippines in 1990. Her vast experience and expertise in her field have significantly guided the NCBP in the implementation of national policies and guidelines on biosafety in the pursuit of attaining food security, protecting public health and the environment, and improving the quality of human life. Given this 27th day of at Ortigas, Pasig City. Signed, Mario G. Montejo, Secretary, DOST, and Chairperson, NCBP.
Thank you very much. And the next awardee is Dr. Ricardo Lantican, plaque of appreciation, National Scientist and Professor Emeritus, University of the Philippines, Los Baños, for his invaluable contributions and unwavering support to the National Committee on Biosafety of the Philippines, or NCBP, in his capacity as NCBP chairperson from October 1990 to December 1992. His vast experience and expertise in his field had significantly guided the NCBP in the implementation of national policies and guidelines on biosafety in the pursuit of attaining food security, protecting public health and the environment, and improving the quality of human life. Given this 27th day of October 2015 at Ortigas, Pasig City, signed Mario G. Montejo, Secretary DOST and Chairperson, NCBP.
Our next awardee happened to be not around, so we'll just mention the name of Dr. Dr. William National Academy.
None other than Dr. Academy for contribution support to the National Committee on Biosafety of the Philippines, NCBP, in her capacity as NCBP chairperson from January 1995 to November 1998. Her vast experience and expertise in her field had significantly guided the NCBP in the implementation of national policies and guidelines on biosafety in the pursuit of attaining food security, protecting public health and the environment, and improving the quality of human life. Given this 27th day of October 2015 at Ortigas, Pasig City, signed Mario G. Montejo, Secretary, DOST, and Chairperson, NCBP.
And the last awardee happens to be in the US today. So let me just mention the name. Dr. Rogelio A. Panlasigi, Member at Large, National Research Council of the Philippines. Isang photo op po. And for the next photo op po, kasama po kaming dalawa. May request po dito. Pa-picture po muna ng isa. Kasama po ang MC. Thank you very much po. Congratulations.
Okay, wow. Thank you very much, awardees. At talagang nakikita sa kanila ang...
Yes, no?
Oo,
Imagine,
ang ganda ng panahon.
I had a photo op with them.
Yes. So again, congratulations to all of you. And let us now move on to another topic in our forum. He is the Regulatory Affairs and Stewardship Leader of the Golden Rice Project at the International Rice Research Institute. Prior to taking on the assignment, he was a Global Registration Manager and Regulatory Leader of Canada in behalf of DuPont Pioneer. As Executive Vice President of Agbayos, he was involved in numerous U.S. aid projects that focused on working with governments, regulatory authorities, and biotechnology stakeholders to develop science-based policies, as well as professional capacity of scientists and regulators to conduct risk assessment. Here to talk on how regulation adapts to recent science, give it up for Dr. Donald Mackenzie.
Dear distinguished officials, academicians, members of the NCBP, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's my great pleasure to be here this morning to talk a little bit about how regulations adapt to recent scientific developments. I was a little challenged by the assignment that was given to me because it could be about how regulations have adapted to changes, or it could be about how regulatory systems and regulations should adapt to changes, because those are two very different kinds of questions with different answers. And also the changes. What are the scientific advancements? Because we could be talking about scientific advancements in methods of plant breeding, or advancements in slate products, or even it could in what's going on in trees. So I'm going to try and give you one person's perspective on little bits and pieces of each of those as I go through the next 15 or 20 minutes or so. And somewhere there must be a tool for me to change the slides. So for me anyways, it's always good to begin with a little bit of sort of baseline, looking back on where we've been and thinking about, plant breeding over many, many years. And so we've got a number of examples of different kinds of plant breeding techniques, methods of genetic modification, if you will, that have been with us for a long time. We've got conventional crossbreeding. We've got mutation breeding, so using either ionizing radiation or chemical mutagens to introduce variation in crop plants, and that's been with us since the 1930s. And there have been about over 3,000 new plant varieties introduced as a result of mutation breeding. We've got processes such as polyploidy, so how we can create seedless watermelon, for example, or other seedless fruits. We've got techniques such as protoplast fusion, so mixing wheat and rye to make triticale. I guess that was done at the end of the 19th century, so that's a technique that's been around for a long time. All of these techniques we're very comfortable with, and the public is very comfortable with them, and there don't seem to be huge concerns around the safety of the products made with those techniques. And yet each of those techniques has some ability to introduce randomness into the system. Random events can happen. And each of those techniques, there is a regulatory framework, if you will, that deals with them. Again, it's one that's been around for a long time. Many countries have systems of variety registration, plant variety protection. Almost all countries have phytosanitary regulations that control the trade of products of conventional breeding. And in variety registration systems, oftentimes there are standards that deal with things like maximum levels of glycoalkaloids in potatoes or maximum levels of erucic acid and glucosinolates that you can have an oilseed rape. So even the products of these conventional techniques are not totally unregulated. There is some level of regulation. Then the world changed a little bit in the early 1980s when this new technique of genetic engineering came around, transgenesis. And the first transgenic plant was antibiotic resistance marker expressing tobacco that was created by Robert Fraley back in 1982. And then the first field trials of transgenic plants, these would have been herbicide-tolerant tobacco, occurred in France and in the United States in 1986. And with the advent of this new technology, there were the obvious questions and concerns that came up. Did this new technique have some possibility of creating new kinds of hazards or harms that we weren't familiar with? Should the technique be regulated? How should we appropriately steward these products? So all of these sort of very legitimate questions started to come up. And as people were thinking about how to regulate it, there was this report from the National Academy of Sciences in the United States back in 1987. And kind of important conclusions from that sort of study were that there was no evidence that there were new hazards associated with this new breeding technique. Scientists at the time felt that the risks were of the same kind that could be present in any type of breeding method. And their opinion at that time was that the assessment of risks of these products should be based on the characteristics of the product, the environment into which it's being introduced, and really not focusing on the method by which the product was created. So really looking at it from what are the characteristics of the thing, how is it going to be used, what's the environment that it's going to be released into, and then what are the possible risks that we should be concerned about. So shortly thereafter, we've heard about it, already this morning quite a bit. There was the elaboration of frameworks. And this started, both here in the Philippines, as we heard, in the early 1990s, but then also in those countries where this technology was being first adopted and wanting to come into the marketplace. And there were reasons for having regulations. And some of the reasons that were put forward at the time were, well, of course, number one, we want to protect the environment, human health and safety, and animal health. So those are protection goals and aspirations. Secondly, there was the notion that the regulations would provide a predictable environment for developers to operate in. And particularly developers that were corporations and companies who all have lawyers that work for the company. And one of the things that they're always worried about is liability. And so companies and corporations really hate to have an environment where there's ambiguity and they're not sure, is the product that I'm developing, is it believed to be safe? Has the government going to given me some sort of a stamp of approval? That kind of a thinking. And so that's kind of what went into thinking around predictable regulatory environments. And then, of course, there was a desire to build and promote the confidence of the public in the new technology. That in fact, all of the potential risks and hazards were being carefully and methodically evaluated by governments before the products would come onto the marketplace so that consumers could be assured in their safety. Not that they necessarily even needed or wanted to know about the technology or how it was done, but just to have confidence that when they bought their food in the marketplace or wherever, there was some assurance of safety. So we had different countries around the world that took different approaches. Some countries decided to adapt their existing regulatory framework, things like ACT or something, and sort of bolt on a biosafety component to it and being able to deal with technology that way. Other countries decided that, well, we really do need a new law. We need some new legislation and new regulations specifically designed to regulate this particular technology. Other countries, there are problems in enacting new laws, but we can have guidelines and guidance and sort of non-regulatory approaches, if you will, to deal with these products. And they took that approach. And all of these different approaches can work. There's no problem with any one of them. And then towards sort of the end of the 1990s, we saw the evolution of the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety. So an international environmental regulation, if you will, that's meant to control the transboundary movement and environmental introduction of living modified organisms or living GMOs, however. That, I think, has probably been the most influential happening or undertaking, if you will, related to biosafety. Because it has, in essence, it has stimulated countries, probably more than 120 countries now have established national biosafety frameworks. And there have been projects in over 50 biotechnology of the world. And so we are in this situation at the moment where these particular products are amongst the most highly regulated anywhere. They're in the same category as pharmaceuticals and pesticides when it comes to the level of regulation. A few years ago, CropLife International had a study done that was intended to look at the costs of bringing new plant biotech products to the marketplace. And the results of that study were some sort of sobering statistics that it took about 13 years and $136 million to bring a new plant biotech product all the way from conception to the farmer's field, and that about $35 million of that was related to regulatory costs. I don't know whether I believe those numbers because they're quite frankly astounding. But whatever the actual number is, I'm pretty sure it's large. And so we have right now this situation where there are really only a few large multinational corporations that seem to be able to play this game. And there are very few examples of any products developed in the public sector that have actually found their way into farmers' fields. The information and data requirements of regulators in different countries has gone in only one direction, upwards. And it's not really just because regulators have asked for more information. It's also applicators. And one of the arenas where they compete is in regulatory affairs. And sometimes there is the feeling that the way to get an application through the regulatory system the fastest is to feed it more information. And of course, when one applicant provides a certain kind of study, there's an expectation raised with a regulator that another applicant has to meet or try and beat. And so we have this sort of escalation, if you will. It's an arms race in regulatory data, is one way to think about it. We also have this situation where it's not just about getting approvals locally here in the Philippines. It's about the implications globally. Developing a new GM rice for India, for example, I have to think about the fact that India is either the number 2 exporter of rice. And where are the countries that India exports? I'm surprised to find out it's Senegal, and it's Benin, and it's other countries in West Africa, as well as countries in Southeast Asia. And so if I'm a public sector scientist trying to develop a product for India, recognizing that that product might be exported, I've all of a sudden got to think about regulatory frameworks in a whole bunch of other countries that I might not be familiar with at all. It gets really very complicated. And I guess the other thing that's worth sort of challenging a little bit, and it's unclear, at least to me, whether regulations have actually accomplished what they were intended to do. Have they harms? Does anyone know of any biosafety related harms that have actually been prevented by regulatory frameworks in existence? Have they really provided a predictable environment for developers, if you think about particularly publics, and the evidence of the public in the technology? It seems that some of the stories that we read in the popular press and the public unrest around the technology, you could wind the clock back and think, it feels like 1998. It doesn't feel like 2015. So what have we learned, and sort of talk a little bit about, how has our understanding of the potential risks and that of the technology changed over time? And I'm only going to use one example, and it's the European Union, where the European Commission, over the past 25 years, has spent in excess of 300 million euros funding a whole range of research projects intended to look at the potential risks or hazards, if you will, of genetically modified organisms. And so the topics, projects included things like, gene flow, environmental risks, interactions, impacts, for example, they published their first report in 2001, and they published a sequel to that in 2010. And when you read their report and you read the main conclusion of the report and the introduction of it, it seems that it's not much different than that conclusion from the National Academy of Sciences back in 1987. And so a lot of time has passed, but the conclusions from the beginning remain valid even today. So how have regulatory systems and regulatory frameworks responded to change? So it's rather risky to demonstrate and confirm that the technology isn't inherently more risky than any other kind of breeding. What have we seen? So I've picked a couple of examples, and one of them is from the United States, which arguably you would say is the most permissive regulatory system in the world. And over the period of time from when they first started looking at applications and authorizing products in the mid-1990s up until now, what's happened? A lot of information that we've gathered has increased. It seems, wow, so did the time it took to get a regulatory dossier through the process. So it went from getting a determination of non-regulated consumption to around 3 to 4 years by the time we got to 2009 or so. It's gotten a little bit better since then, but it's still quite lengthy. And some of it is due to science and some of it is not science. So the orange line in the little chart is the timeline for the actual approval. The blue line and dots that are below that is the time that's taken for the scientific review to be completed. And the gap between the two of them is really kind of non-science related administrative issues, which could be court cases, litigation, other administrative things that basically clog the system, if you will. The other example, sort of just below that, is from the European Union. And again, it shows a steady increase in the length of time it takes to get an application through the EFSA review. So what started out as being something that took a year or 2 years is probably by now taking 4 to 5 years. Kind of an interesting correlation there, because the little blue line that you can probably hardly make out is the number of guidance documents that EFSA issues. And so it seems that the more guidance that EFSA puts out there, the longer it takes for reviews to happen. Now, I don't know, maybe that's just a strange correlation and it's not causality at all, but it's kind of interesting to look at. Over the years, governments have been talking about international harmonization of regulations a lot in all kinds of different fora, whether it's at OECD or elsewhere. There are really very few examples, hardly any examples, where actual harmonization and cooperation between countries has happened. You know, you think about two of the countries that have been involved in this game the longest and who trade agricultural products a tremendous amount, Canada and the United States. There's no cooperation. There's no joint reviews. There are some harmonization in data requirements, but each of those countries is going about their business themselves in their own little silos. And you could think about sort of any number of other different examples. And there aren't really any examples of countries that are taking what used to be a rather rigorous approach and trying to make it more streamlined and easy for products that they're already quite familiar with. Doesn't seem to happen. And there's also this sense, and I'm sure everybody will almost agree with it, that everybody thinks their environment is unique. That's why we have to do biosafety trials in our own country to be sure that when we release the product in our country, it's going to be safe. Because our environment is different than the environment in Vietnam, or the environment in Cambodia, or the environment in anywhere else. But I think it's worth trying to challenge that notion just a little bit. You know, really, from a biosafety perspective, how different are some of these agroecological systems in farmers' fields? You know, if you think about BT corn, that's been growing here for quite a while, and it's been growing around the world, and you think about all of the different temperate and tropical where BT maize has been cultivated. Has anybody found an environment where Monate 10 is less biosafe? So really, do these kinds of field trials and that actually need to be conducted in everybody's country individually? Or can we make use of the fact that agroecosystems don't respect national boundaries? And sometimes you can have quite similar agroecosystems that cross over between countries. Now we're getting to the area of genome editing, and I'm not about it because we're having after lunch where Shweta is going to talk to us about all of that technology. So the only thing that I'm going to say about it, though, is that it's kind of reminiscent of 1986, 87, where we're kinds of being asked. Here's a brand new technology, or a suite of technologies, if you will, new tools in the plant breeder's toolbox. Do they present new risks? Do they require regulation, more regulation, less regulation? Does your regulatory system have to change to capture or take into account the products of this new technology? Is this a challenge or an opportunity? All really good questions. So I'm going to use a bit of an illustration, and I apologize for talking about canola because it's really not important here in the Philippines. But it's an real of technology system. So at the very top, we've got image-tolerant canola. So canola tolerant azolanone herbicides produced through patient. In the middle, we've got transgenic canola. So glyphosate tolerant and glufosinate tolerant canola produced through recombinant DNA techniques, the techniques that we've been happily regulating now for the past 25 years or so. And then at the bottom, we've got another herbicide-tolerant canola produced by Cibus Corporation, and they use genome editing to make it, and it's a herbicide-tolerant canola as well. It's sulfonylurea-tolerant canola, and in fact, they through genome editing, introduced the same mutation that was introduced through mutation breeding in the canola at the top. So how should these things be regulated? So I'll use the example of one country, Canada, whose regulatory system allows it to regulate everything. It can regulate all the products of old breeding techniques, all the products of current breeding techniques, and all the products of breeding techniques that no one has even dreamed about yet. Because it's an example of the only product-based regulatory framework in the world. And so, of course, Canadians happily regulated and approved products of each of these techniques. Now, mutation breeding, not regulated in the United States and not regulated anywhere else in the world, but was regulated in Canada. Transgenic breeding techniques, regulated across the board by everybody. The Cibus canola example, gene editing, regulated in Canada, was not regulated in the United States, and I put a question mark there as how will other countries deal with this product or products like this in the future. So it's an example where I'm trying to show strength and a weakness. And of course, the strength of the regulatory country called Canada, the regulations and the framework never have what new breeding from the pipeline, always be able to handle it. The weakness, though, is that if you were to go and study the definition of a novel trait in Canada's seeds regulations, you would quickly come to the conclusion that that example on the bottom is absolutely not a novel trait, because all the canola in Canada is herbicide-tolerant canola. 20 million acres of herbicide-tolerant canola. Half of it, almost, is glufosinate-tolerant or Liberty-Link canola. The other almost half Roundup tolerant, and then the percent of Clearfield canola. So how could another herbicide-tolerant canola ever be considered to be novel in a place like that where all of the crop is already herbicide-tolerant? So while there's strength in the regulations that are on the books, the weakness, of course, is in the people who enforce the regulations. So you're having people to make wise decisions and policy. At least in that country, they really haven't lived up to the promise of doing that. Because that framework is the one example of a framework both to changes and also can de-escalate as needed when you become familiar with certain technologies. So opportunities, kind of find three drivers for change in regulatory frameworks. Drivers are things that are being regulated. The second is sort of new breeding techniques and technologies that are coming down the pipeline. And what I'm proposing, if framework ideally, is one that isn't tied to a particular technology, that it's tied to specific protection goals that government wants to achieve. And perhaps need to techniques are sort of regulated in a consistent fashion. I think frameworks shouldn't have to be rewritten and changed every time a bright scientist comes up with a new way to modify a crop. However, the practice of regulation should always be open to change. And there are lots of opportunities to do that. You know, by now now we should be able to get to the point of wanting our risk assessments really to be commensurate with the level of risk and fit for purpose. More data, more information doesn't really mean more safety. It does mean higher costs and a greater burden. By now, regulators and scientists are getting quite familiar with we So not recognizing in each of those countries, but recognizing that the risk assessment work that both agencies do is very similar. And in fact, one agency can benefit from the work already done by another agency and as for either from field trials and look at, agro ecosystems, identifying where they are in common between countries. So I'll use another example, and I hate to point to the US and Canada again, but for example, if you're making an application for environmental release or cultivation approval in Canada, all of your data can come from the United States. You don't have to conduct your field trials in Canada. And that's been done in the past. And it's a recognition that, for example, corn growing regions in some parts of the United States are the same as they are in Canada. Therefore, the data collected in one are relevant to the other. Consider, not just risk assessment, risks and benefits assessment. Sometimes the benefit, any sort of minor outstanding risks. And it's important to do all of these things because it's really what's necessary to enable the public sector to be able to participate in this as we do in the opportunity to think carefully about whether and how those techniques and their products are regulated, learning from the experience of the past 25 years so that we end up in maybe a different place 25 years from now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mackenzie. Stay here on the stage like this morning. Those who want to ask a question, please stand to be recognized and state your name and your affiliation. The first person who's going to ask a question is Miss Melly Tenorio.
My paper is different today, paper.
Your paper. Okay. Am I correct?
No, no. This is just a question, but in the case of the Philippines, we are one of the most largest importer of rice. If not number one, number two. And during the few years, on the average, the Philippines importing at least 1 million metric tons.
That's a very good question. and, and there are certainly, already fora for doing that within OECD. There is a task force on the harmonized overology. So that's one place to have those conversations. But it can also happen even just bilaterally between representatives of two countries who have a mutual interest in achieving some harmonization. Yeah.
No more. Sir, if I was canola is going to be the start of a new regulation, because as we know, this was obtained through the new breeding techniques, and there were some which we thought were not GMs in the beginning, just like the RNAi, some of the gene silence products. So would you think that backwards on some of those GM crops, which doesn't really need this harmonization comes in?
So I think the question was, can we go back and revisit some of the policy choices that we made in the past? Well, why not? And I think it's really comes it comes down to the will and the desire of the regulators and the policymakers in government. Because if there's a will, there's a way to make the change and make adjustments, for sure.
I can see another hand raising.
Over there. Yes, ma'am.
Miss Jenny.
Morning, Dr. Mackenzie. I'm Jenny Panopia from Pioneer. You mentioned that in terms of public confidence on the technology. It seems like we're still in the 1998 scenario, right? So what do you think have we missed, or what we have not done in those years, and what could have been done, or what can we still do with all these new technologies coming in? Thank you.
Easy question. It gets very complicated because the public's worried by many different things. It's not just concerns about safety, but the public is also concerned about multinational domination of the seed sector. They're worried about the motivations of some of these companies that so far, up until now, have been the main actors and players in this particular field. You know, we could philosophically ask the question, would the public's feelings today be the same if the first products into the marketplace had come from the public sector and from universities and that? And maybe not. And so my hope is that, you know, the more that we can stimulate and provide an enabling environment for the public sector and small and medium-sized enterprises, so introduce products into that's going to in the public's perception and reaction, for sure. Yeah.
Anyone? If we do not have anybody who would like to throw any question, so we'd like to say thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
And
Why don't you ask me a question?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, I am hungry or not?
Okay. So Tita Melly is now, they have prepared it, then we can have our lunch, and please everybody's requested to be back at 1 p.m. so we can start earlier than scheduled. Thank you very much. Have a nice lunch, everyone.